Imagine a fortress not made by human hands, but shaped over thousands of years by wind, snow, and time itself. This colossal glacier has stood here since long before the first civilizations rose. It has seen the Earth's climate shift countless times, yet remained an immovable guardian of the Antarctic. But now, in the stillness of Antarctica's endless white, this giant is dying. It is cracking, splintering, and sliding toward the sea. Its name is Thwaites Glacier, but scientists have given it a far more haunting title: the Doomsday Glacier. Not for drama, but for truth, because if this glacier falls, it will trigger a chain reaction that will touch every ocean, reshape every coastline, and change life for billions of people. This is not a distant, abstract risk. It is a ticking clock made of ice, and the clock is counting down faster than anyone predicted. Thwaites Glacier sits deep in West Antarctica, along the remote and storm-battered Amundsen Sea. From above, it appears as a shimmering white plain stretching endlessly toward the horizon, a frozen landscape so vast that the human eye cannot grasp its scale. It is about 120 kilometers wide, a width that could easily span from one major city to another, and its ice is over a kilometer thick in places. The sheer mass of frozen water it contains is almost impossible to imagine, covering roughly 192,000 square kilometers, about the size of Florida or the entire United Kingdom. Thwaites is not just another glacier. It is a structural cornerstone of the Antarctic ice sheet, acting like a massive cork, keeping even larger glaciers from sliding into the sea. Without Thwaites, those glaciers would flow freely into the ocean, accelerating global sea level rise. In simple terms, this glacier is one of the planet's most critical natural barriers against climate chaos. It is the last line of defense, holding back a flood that could reshape the geography of Earth. The title Doomsday Glacier might sound like media hype, but it comes from the scientists studying it, and for good reason. Thwaites contains enough ice to raise global sea levels by about 65 centimeters, or more than 2 feet. On its own, that's enough to cause chronic flooding in coastal cities, destroy low-lying farmland, and displace millions. But Thwaites is also the gatekeeper to the rest of the West Antarctic ice sheet. If that ice sheet were to collapse, the oceans would rise by nearly 10 feet. Picture iconic cities like New York, Miami, Shanghai, London, and Mumbai with their streets swallowed by seawater. Not during storms, but permanently. Entire island nations in the Pacific and Indian Oceans would disappear beneath the waves. This wouldn't happen overnight, but once the process starts, it will be unstoppable for centuries. The Doomsday name is not exaggeration. It is a blunt warning from the scientific community about what is at stake if Thwaites goes. When we think of melting ice, we imagine sunlight slowly warming the surface. But Thwaites is under attack from below. Warm ocean currents, driven by changes in wind and climate patterns, are sneaking underneath its floating ice shelf. These waters are several degrees above freezing, enough to melt the ice from the bottom up, carving out hidden chambers that weaken the glacier's structure. This melting undermines the glacier's grounding line, the point where it is anchored to the seabed. As the grounding line retreats, gravity begins pulling more ice into the ocean. This is where the nightmare begins. A feedback loop. The more ice is exposed to warm water, the faster it melts. The faster it melts, the more is exposed. Scientists call this a marine ice sheet instability, a runaway process that, once triggered, is almost impossible to reverse. In Thwaites' case, this instability may already be underway. The glacier is retreating faster than ever before. In the 1990s, it was losing ice slowly. Today, satellites show it pulling back by nearly a kilometer per year. Its surface is scarred by enormous fractures, some stretching for miles. These cracks signal deep instability, like the warning creaks of a collapsing building. Underneath, autonomous submarines have mapped voids the size of skyscrapers where solid ice once stood. One cavity, large enough to hold 14 billion tons of ice, was discovered just a few years ago. The warm water is reaching further and deeper, melting ice at rates that even the most pessimistic models didn't predict. Some scientists now believe that certain parts of Thwaites have already crossed the threshold into irreversible collapse. If Thwaites collapses partially, the world will still see devastating effects. Cities like Jakarta, Miami, and Bangkok would face chronic flooding. Saltwater intrusion would poison freshwater supplies, and storm surges would become far more destructive. But if the collapse triggers the failure of the entire West Antarctic ice sheet, the seas could rise by up to 10 feet over the coming centuries. This would redraw the world's map. Major river deltas like the Nile, Ganges, and Mekong, home to hundreds of millions, would be submerged. Agricultural lands would vanish, leading to food shortages. Coastal economies, from fishing to tourism to shipping, would suffer trillions of dollars in losses. Climate tipping points could also be triggered. Changes in ocean currents could disrupt global weather systems, altering rainfall patterns, collapsing fisheries, and even affecting the stability of the Arctic. The collapse of Thwaites would send shockwaves far beyond Antarctica. The sudden influx of fresh water into the ocean would disrupt marine ecosystems. From plankton to whales, coral reefs could bleach and die as ocean chemistry changes. Fish populations could crash, threatening global food security for billions. Politically, the consequences could be just as severe. Rising seas would create climate refugees on a scale never seen before, potentially hundreds of millions of people forced to leave their homes. This mass displacement could spark international conflicts over resources and territory. Entire economies dependent on coastal infrastructure would be crippled. The collapse of Thwaites wouldn't just be an environmental disaster. It would be an economic and geopolitical one. Around the world, scientists are racing to study Thwaites before it's too late. The International Thwaites Glacier Collaboration, a joint effort by the US and UK, has sent icebreakers, helicopters, and drones to this remote corner of the planet. They are drilling nearly a kilometer through the ice to place instruments that measure temperature, salinity, and movement beneath the glacier. Satellites orbiting hundreds of kilometers above Earth are providing high-resolution imagery, tracking changes in the glacier's height and speed. Supercomputers are running climate models to predict how quickly the collapse could unfold and what it would mean for global sea levels. This is one of the most hostile environments on Earth. Temperatures plunge far below freezing, storms rage for days, and yet teams of scientists endure these conditions because the stakes are nothing less than the future of the world's coastlines. Predictions vary. Some models suggest that major parts of Thwaites could collapse within the next 20 to 50 years. Others warn of sudden, rapid disintegration within decades. What is certain is that the glacier's retreat is accelerating. And even if all greenhouse gas emissions stopped tomorrow, the melting would continue for centuries because of the heat already stored in the oceans. The outcome would depend not just on science, but on political will, technological innovation, and global cooperation. We cannot stop Thwaites from melting entirely, but we can slow it down. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions is the most critical step. Shifting from fossil fuels to renewable energy, protecting forests and wetlands, and developing carbon capture technologies. Coastal cities can invest in seawalls, flood defenses, and climate-resilient infrastructure. International cooperation is vital. This is not a problem any one nation can solve alone. It will require a united effort to share resources, technology, and strategies. Every fraction of a degree we prevent in global warming could mean more years to prepare, adapt, and protect vulnerable communities. Thousands of miles from the nearest city, in a land where no trees grow and the wind never stops, a giant of ice is dying. Its fall will not be a single moment of chaos, but a slow, relentless tide that creeps into our lives, flooding streets, swallowing homes, and changing coastlines forever. We like to think of Antarctica as distant, untouched, separate from our daily lives. But the truth is the opposite. What happens there will decide the fate of our shores, our cities, and our future. Thwaites Glacier is speaking, with cracks, with groans, with the sound of ice breaking after thousands of years. The question is, are we listening?